Chapter 52. Sheriff Galpin arrived at the Gates mansion with a convoy of patrol cars, their sirens fading as yellow police tape fluttered in the night breeze, cordoning off the property. The house loomed in front of him, an imposing, time-worn Victorian structure, its once grand facade now dulled by years of neglect and creeping ivy. The windows were mostly intact, some stained glass still catching the light with faded colors, while others were clouded by dust and grime. As he stepped inside, the sheriff's boots echoed softly against the creaky hardwood floors. Dust hung in the air, disturbed only by their entrance. The mansion was eerily silent, save for the occasional creak from settling wood and the distant drip of water. He moved cautiously through the main floor, noting the peeling wallpaper and the thick layer of dust on antique furniture. The atmosphere was heavy with a sense of something long forgotten but still watching. When he reached Laura Gates' bedroom upstairs, the scene unsettled him. The room was immaculate, pristine even, with the bed perfectly made, curtains drawn neatly, and not a speck of dust to be seen. It was as if someone had been living there, or at least maintaining the room with care, despite the mansion's abandonment. Down in the basement, the sheriff's team searched thoroughly but found none of the body parts or torture tools they expected. Instead, the space held only old boxes, cobweb-covered shelves. In the living room, there was a chilling altar devoted to Joseph Crackstone. A large, grim portrait of Crackstone hung above the altar, eyes seemingly following their every move. The shrine was well-maintained, recent candles melted and replaced, marking the presence of someone with a dark purpose. Sheriff Galpin sat back in his office chair, the glow of his phone screen illuminating his tired face. The video began, shaky and dim, like something straight out of a horror flick. The kid's nervous whisper cut through the silence. "If this was an episode of Haunted Histories, I'd be narrating about now," Eugene murmured, flashlight bobbing in the darkness. The legendary Gates mansion, last known residence of Laura Gates, sister of serial killer Garrett Gates. Preserved like a mausoleum. Galpin's eyes narrowed as the camera wove through the dusty rooms. Wednesday led the way, stepping cautiously into the parlor. Behind a broken chaise lounge and tattered curtains, the camera paused on something unnatural, an altar. Old, but suspiciously well kept. The video showed close-ups, bones, burnt-out candles, dried herbs arranged meticulously. Galpin's jaw tightened when he saw the name carved into the stone wall, Joseph Crackstone. The kids' whispered voices floated through the speaker. Wednesday's voice was calm but tense. "It's been used recently." Galpin glanced up from the screen for a moment, heart tightening. Recent use? That altar was supposed to be abandoned, forgotten. But the footage said otherwise. Eugene's flashlight caught a portrait above the fireplace, the Gates family. The painted eyes seemed to stare directly into the camera, unsettling in their lifelike glare. Why would anyone worship a xenophobic maniac? Tyler's voice echoed in the room. Galpin felt a flicker of unease. That question didn't have a simple answer. The video showed the group splitting up, the floorboards creaking underfoot. Upstairs, the camera lingered on Laura Gates's bedroom, spotless, immaculate, untouched by time. Galpin swallowed hard at the eerie perfection, the velvet bedspread, the dusty porcelain dolls, and then the music box. The lullaby it played was warped, haunting, and somehow familiar. The footage shifted to the garage, revealing an old vintage car, eerily clean despite the years. Then came the basement. Galpin's breath hitched. The smell from the video seemed to seep through the screen, copper, damp decay. The camera swept over shelves packed with jars of yellowed flesh and organs. Surgical tools glinted under the flashlight's beam. Tables stained with dried blood. A bone saw beside a pair of gloves, frozen in time. And then, the coolers. The camera trembled as Tyler opened one. Galpin watched in grim silence as Eden's scream pierced the air. Severed limbs. Hands. A partial torso. The brutal reality laid bare. Wednesday's voice was steady, chilling. "This is where the serial killer displays his trophies." Galpin's fists clenched. The evidence was undeniable. The tension snapped with the sudden slam of a door above them. Footsteps. Someone else was there. Xavier's hand covered Eden's mouth. Wednesday's whisper was barely audible. "We're not alone." The video ended. Sheriff Galpin sat in the dark, the phone's light fading as the weight of what he'd just seen settled deep in his bones. An envelope arrived at the mayor's office that morning, its wax seal broken only after 3 security checks. Whatever was inside was enough to make Mayor Walker drop his schedule and call Sheriff Galpin for an emergency meeting at the weather vane that afternoon. Meanwhile, Wednesday Addams sat stiffly in her usual booth by the window, arms crossed, expression souring with every second. Tyler slid a fresh cup of coffee toward her, but she didn't touch it. "I told you," she muttered. "We should have called the sheriff immediately." 15 minutes. That's all it took for someone to scrub a murder basement clean. Tyler tried to soften the edge in her voice with calm reason. "They'll slip up eventually. No one covers their tracks forever." Wednesday's eyes flicked to him like a scalpel. A necromancer wouldn't leave tracks. They'd just rearrange the corpses. She went quiet again, her coffee untouched. Her mind kept looping through the timeline, how it had only taken the minutes to return to Nevermore, and still, by the time Sheriff Galpin arrived, the basement of horrors had turned into a dusty old cellar. No body parts. No tools. No blood. Just a chillingly clean bedroom and a centuries-old altar to crack stone. They had to have help, she finally said. A network. Maybe even an insider at Nevermore. Before Tyler could respond, the bell above the cafe door jingled. Sheriff Galpin stepped inside, scanning the room until his eyes landed on them. He looked more worn than usual, as if sleep hadn't dared visit him last night. Wednesday turned to face him without getting up. "Any updates?" Galpin glanced toward the counter, but didn't sit. "Still combing through what we can. No sign of the missing body parts. No signs of tampering in the Gates mansion garage. But the car..." Wednesday leaned forward, voice cutting through. "Never mind the bodies. Where's the car?" "Vintage. Well-maintained. It couldn't have gone far." "We're working on it," Galpin said through gritted teeth. "I've got deputies checking scrapyards and private garages." "You should have started checking every abandoned building the day this case began," Wednesday snapped. "We wouldn't be chasing ghosts if you did." "All right, enough," Tyler said, stepping between them, hands raised slightly. "We're all on the same side here." Sheriff Galpin exhaled. Walker said he might have a lead. Something about a name from the past coming back up. He looked out the window just as Mayor Walker stepped off the curb, crossing the street toward the cafe. And then, screeching tires. A blur of metal shot into view. The missing car. It barreled through the intersection, engine roaring like an animal set loose, and slammed into the mayor with brutal force. The sound of impact silenced the cafe in a single, horrifying moment. Mayor Walker's body was flung across the pavement. Glass shattered. Someone screamed. Wednesday stood frozen, eyes wide. Donovan bolted for the door. Tyler, pulling out his phone and calling 911. Galpin rushed outside, hand already on his radio, barking for medics and backup. Wednesday remained inside, staring through the cracked glass window at the crumpled body of the mayor and the car, definitely the one from the Gates mansion, already skidding out of sight. She didn't need caffeine anymore. Rain poured relentlessly from a slate-gray sky, soaking through black umbrellas and turning the grass into mud. A fresh grave had been dug near the edge of Jericho's cemetery, the mayor's casket suspended above it by ropes now slick and trembling under the weight of silence. A sea of black umbrellas surrounded the site. The townspeople stood quietly, dressed in mourning, some out of duty, some out of shock. Principal Weems stood nearest the casket, stoic in her long black coat. Her platinum hair, neatly tucked into a sleek twist, had started to curl in the damp air. Beside her stood Miss Thornhill, red hair darker under the rain, her expression unreadable. Dr. Kimbot dabbed her eyes with a soaked handkerchief. Whether from grief or rain, her mascara had begun to smudge. In the front row, Lucas Walker, the mayor's son, stared at the casket with red-rimmed eyes, jaw clenched so tightly it trembled. His fists were curled in his coat pockets, and the rain sliding down his face disguised any tears that might have escaped. Sheriff Galpin stood behind Lucas, his hat dripping, his posture rigid. His face was as pale as the clouds above, and his gaze never left the coffin. The shock of the incident hadn't faded from his eyes. Next to him, Tyler stood silently, soaked through despite the umbrella he held. He kept looking between his dad and the casket like he didn't know where to place his grief. The last thing his dad needed now was more chaos, but Tyler had seen the car. He'd called 911, and none of it had made a difference. At the edge of the gathering, Wednesday Addams stood in a long, black Victorian coat. She a black umbrella. The rain fell over her like a baptism in sorrow. Beside her stood Xavier, hands folded respectfully, eyes flicking toward Wednesday with concern. She hadn't said a word since they arrived. The priest's voice echoed beneath the weeping sky. A leader taken too soon. Mayor Walker believed in unity, in protecting both town and school, even when the past threatened to resurface. We commend his soul to rest. A heavy pause. Then, the ropes creaked as the casket was slowly lowered into the ground. The thud of wet dirt echoed like the closing of a chapter. Lucas stepped forward, a single white rose in hand. His knuckles were bone white from gripping the stem too tightly. He knelt, placed it on the casket, and whispered something only the rain could hear. Wednesday turned her head slightly, observing. She had no affection for most public displays of grief, but there was something about Lucas's pain that sat heavy in the back of her throat. Thunder rumbled in the distance. Behind the mourners, a single crow landed on a gravestone. Watching. Waiting. Chapter 53. The funeral was dreary, the kind that pleased Wednesday on any other day. But the mayor's sudden death had unsettled even her. Beneath her umbrella, she spotted a familiar silhouette slinking behind the gravestones, half hidden in the fog. Bald head, wild eyes, electric grin. "Uncle Fester," she muttered. "You always did find me in the weirdest places," he said. Without hesitation, she whisked him away to Nevermore. The students were still in mourning. No one noticed. She led him to the beekeeper's shed. Inside, Wednesday pried open the floorboards, revealing the trapdoor to her secret cellar, a cramped, low-lit chamber carved out of the earth itself. "This is cozy," Fester said, ducking in. "Smells like mildew and poor life choices." The walls were lined with crates stuffed with stolen police files, newspaper clippings, and half-charred books from the Nightshade Library. She walked over to one crate and pulled out a sketch, sharpened claws, bulging eyes, fangs like broken glass. Fester's smile vanished. "Where did you see that?" "You know what it is?" Wednesday asked. Fester took the sketch. "It's called The Hide." "As in Jekyll and Hyde?" He nodded grimly. "They don't just snap. They're awakened. You've seen one. Back in '83. Zurich Institute for the Criminally Insane. Went undercover for a few months. Therapeutic curiosity." She stared. There was this girl, Olga Malkova. Used to be a concert pianist. Until she transformed during a performance and butchered the entire front row. Music critics. Blood on every piano key. Wednesday blinked. What happened to her? No idea. Last I saw, she was in group shock therapy. Tried to strangle the nurse with a violin string. Wednesday turned away, frustration tightening her voice. "I've scoured every book I could find, even in the Nightshade Library. Nothing." Fester rubbed his chin. "Have you tried Faulkner's journal?" "Faulkner." Her eyes narrowed. The name rang like a warning bell. In the timeline before she and Tyler traveled back to the 1620s, Nathaniel Faulkner was the original founder of Nevermore. But now he was just an eccentric old headmaster buried somewhere in the school's long-forgotten past. "He wasn't always a teacher," Fester said, pacing the room. Before he sought refuge at Nevermore in 1791, he traveled the world, cataloged every outcast tribe, every freak, every creature that didn't belong. I haven't seen any of his work, Wednesday admitted. Fester grinned. Then it's time we dig. She led him down through the tunnel behind her cellar, crawling through the tight, damp shaft. Fester groaned the whole way. This is inhumane. I'm not a ferret. Stop whining, Wednesday muttered ahead of him. Eventually, they reached the narrow break in the stone wall. Fester barely squeezed through and immediately lit up. The Nightshade Library? He gasped. How do you find hiding spots that just happen to lead to secret societies? I've always had a penchant for secret passageways. As they stepped inside, the soft rustle of pages met them, echoing between the forgotten tomes. Fester turned and froze. Thing was perched on a stack of books, trembling like a kettle about to scream. Hello, Thing, Fester said with a smile. Thing leapt from the stack and launched straight at him, slapping and scrambling. This is about Kalamazoo, isn't it? That safe was faulty. Wednesday rolled her eyes as the disembodied hand and her uncle brawled across the library floor. Enough, she ordered. Thing stopped, perched on a shelf, twitching. Fester straightened his coat. Your hand needs therapy. Without comment, Wednesday walked to a large velvet painting, Cousin Iggy ITT, captured mid-swoon, and peeled it back to reveal a panel of cool iron. Fester's eyes lit up. There it is. Behind the portrait, tucked away like a final secret, was a safe. Wednesday smiled as Sang cracked open the safe. At least one puzzle is solved. For a moment the flicker of a realization danced behind her eyes. She knew what Tyler was. What she didn't know was who she was to him. The lock clicked. They'd barely made it back through the tunnel when Uncle Fester groaned for the 100th time. He waddled behind her like a disgruntled mole, hunched from the narrow crawlspace. Things scuttled ahead of them on the damp stone floor, clicking his fingers like a nervous spider. When they finally emerged into the cellar, Fester gave a dramatic sigh and stretched his back until it cracked. Next time, I vote we teleport, he muttered. Wednesday ignored him. She flicked on her desk lamp, its yellow glow spilling over a mess of stolen police files, old Nightshade books, and her own scribbled maps. She pulled the newly retrieved journal onto her lap, its leather binding cool and cracked with age. She flipped through it, page after page of drawings, field notes, and ramblings from a man who had once mapped the outcast world. Nathaniel Faulkner. Once just a name, now a thread in a tangled web. There etched in tidy script. The hide. Tyler, she said softly, her eyes scanning the text. Faulkner describes the hide as artistic in nature, but equally vindictive and temperamental. Born of mutation. Dormant until awakened by trauma, hypnosis, or chemical inducement. Uncle Fester leaned in, eyes narrowing. Go on. The awakening forms a bond. An unshakable one. The creature imprints on whoever frees it. Wednesday paused. Sees them as its master. The cellar felt colder suddenly. Her mind reeled, not with fear, but recognition. Her breath caught. And then she remembered. She remembered the fire. Not the pain, just the light. The way it danced, wild and gold, casting shadows across the wooden platform. Crackstone's voice sliced through the memory. Light it! And the torch dropped. The flames bloomed immediately, wrapping around her boots. Villagers shouted, throwing curses and salt, eyes full of hatred. They believed they were purging a witch. Wednesday stood still, watching, knowing. Then she heard it, Tyler's voice, ragged and terrified. Wednesday. She turned. Only slightly. He was charging toward the pyre, pushing through the crowd. But they caught him, dragged him down, fists flying. Crackstone grinned. And Wednesday, even as smoke curled around her, smiled back. Then she screamed. Not from fear. From instinct. A deep, ancestral sound that cracked the air in half. Tyler's body snapped. Bones bent. Skin split. Veins surged black. His hands contorted into claws, jaw unhinged into a monstrous gape. Fur erupted across his body. His spine bowed. Green eyes burned gold. And then he wasn't Tyler anymore. He was the Hyde. 7 feet tall. Hulking. Feral. A grotesque guardian born of rage and devotion. He ripped through the mob like they were made of paper. People screamed. Some ran. Others didn't get the chance. The Hyde locked eyes with her. He surged toward the pyre, seized the stake, and yanked it free with a brutal roar, Wednesday still chained to it. She dangled from his claws, eerily serene. He held her like something sacred. Then he turned and vanished into the forest, cutting down anyone who dared block his path. Wednesday blinked twice as she realized that she was Tyler's master. Wednesday stood alone in the Nightshade Library, the old journal resting beneath her fingertips. She hadn't spoken a word since they returned from the tunnel. Uncle Fester had groaned dramatically the whole way, wedging his way back through the narrow passage, things scuttling like a spider beside him. But now she'd asked to be alone, so she left them in the cellar. The lamplight cast her shadow long across the stone floor as she flipped through Faulkner's pages, each line rewriting her reality. And then she found it, Tyler. Faulkner's words described the Hyde as artistic in nature, but equally vindictive and temperamental. A mutation. A dormant monster that could only be awakened through trauma, hypnosis, or chemical inducement. Once awakened, it would bond to its liberator. It wouldn't just obey. It would serve. And it wouldn't know the difference between suggestion and command. Wednesday's fingers froze on the page. That was it. That was the key. The Hyde didn't just lash out on instinct, it obeyed something deeper. It saw her as its master. Her breath caught. A memory surfaced. Tyler, last summer. Alaska. He said he couldn't go. She'd felt cold, wounded. So she responded the only way she knew how. Don't let anyone see you lose control or see your monster form unless you're prepared to dig a proper grave. Her voice had been deliberate, precise. She meant it as a warning, maybe even protection. But Tyler hadn't taken it that way. You can hunt animals if you must, but if you kill a person, you bury the body. Understand? And he had understood. Far too well. She leaned back, her mind swimming. Every interaction, every dry quip, every sparring remark now cast in a different light. It wasn't just banter. It wasn't just tension. It was programming. And yet, it wasn't total. There were moments, strange ones. The Hyde disobeyed. Once it had pinned her down, wild and violent, its breath hot on her face. It had scared her. Why? If the Hyde served her, why fight her? Unless the bond wasn't absolute. Unless it could resist her. Or worse, unless it didn't know it was obeying her. Like muscle memory. Like instinct. The difference between a command and a suggestion blurred. This wasn't about mind control. This was deeper. Subconscious. Enchanted obedience. But not consent. She sat frozen in that realization, her feelings for Tyler suddenly splintered. She had cared. Still did. But what if he never had a chance to care for her freely? What if the connection they shared wasn't emotional, but primal? Imprinted? She wondered, quietly, what the Hyde would be without her voice in his head. What Tyler could be if he were ever truly alone in his own mind. And worse, she wondered if she even wanted that. Tyler sat in Dr. Kinbot's office again, but he didn't feel like talking. The lavender scent she always used had started to make him nauseous. She crossed her legs, pen in hand, waiting. Eventually, she took the lead. I noticed you haven't mentioned the mayor's death, she said. Considering you witnessed it, that kind of trauma doesn't just fade. Tyler shrugged, eyes fixed on the floor. My dad's been working late. I guess he's trying to move on. So am I. Dr. Kinbot nodded slowly, then narrowed her gaze. And yet, you seem preoccupied with Wednesday Addams. More than usual. He didn't answer at first. Then, she hasn't been herself. She skipped our usual coffee meetup. That never happens unless something's wrong. I asked Eden, Bianca, even Xavier. They all said she's been keeping to herself, wanted to be left alone. He looked up, as if searching for confirmation in Kinbot's eyes, but found only professional curiosity. Did something happen between you two? Tyler shook his head. Not really. I feel like she's slipping away. Like I'm losing her and I don't even know why. Dr. Kinbot exhaled. She set her notebook down, folding her hands. Tyler, I want to talk to you about something called transference. It's common in therapy. When a patient redirects emotions, often from someone they've lost, onto someone else who becomes a surrogate. Tyler flinched at the word lost. The image of his mother flickered behind his eyes. You've experienced profound loss. And I know from our earlier sessions that your father isn't emotionally available. That kind of vacuum doesn't stay empty. The mind reaches for someone to fill it. Sometimes, the first person who shows kindness becomes more than they really are. She paused, watching him absorb it. It's a concept rooted in attachment theory, Tyler. We form bonds quickly when we're grieving, especially if we've been emotionally neglected. It's called grief bonding. You may believe you love Wednesday, but it's possible you're attached to what she represents, a distraction from your pain. His hands twitched. His breathing changed. Dr. Kinbot leaned forward slightly. You need to deal with your mother's death, Tyler. You've been using Wednesday to avoid that. And while I'm sure she's fascinating, she doesn't strike me as emotionally available. She's cold, calculated, smart enough to manipulate someone without even meaning to. He looked up sharply. There was something primal in his eyes now, defensive, possessive. She might be what we call a love bomber, Kinbot added. Someone who gives just enough attention to create dependency, then withdraws it to keep control. Maybe not consciously, but that doesn't make it less dangerous. Tyler's entire posture changed. His jaw clenched. Shoulders tightened. He looked wrong. Too still. I think the best thing you could do, she said carefully, is take space. Use Thanksgiving, maybe even Christmas, to reset. I'm also going to speak to your father. He deserves to know what's been happening before it spirals. That did it. Something cracked open inside him. Something ancient. Animal. His fingers began to tremble. Not from fear, but from strain. His spine arched subtly, as though something were pulling it taut from the inside. His breath hitched. His skin began to ripple. Dr. Kinbot stood, alarmed. Tyler. His eyes flicked to gold. Her face went pale. Then he changed. It started with his back, bones grinding as they twisted and reshaped. His limbs lengthened, bent at unnatural angles. Black veins spread like lightning under his skin. Fur burst through his clothes. His jaw cracked and unhinged, revealing rows of jagged, knife-like teeth. A guttural, inhuman growl echoed through the room. Dr. Kinbot stepped backward, knocking over her chair. Her scream was drowned in the sound of splintering wood and shattering glass. The hide stood before her, 7 feet tall, crouched and twitching, a predator made of pain. But worst of all were his eyes. They weren't empty. They were focused. As if even through the transformation, someone was still watching her, judging her for what she said about Wednesday. She was wrong. This wasn't just obsession. This was devotion. Twisted. Violent. Absolute. And it was the last thing she ever saw. The room fell silent, save for the labored breath of the creature, the broken rhythm of its heart. And a single thought that echoed behind golden eyes. She was going to keep me from Wednesday. No one keeps me from her. That night, Wednesday stood outside the weather vane, her silhouette sharp beneath the flickering street lamp. The diner was clearly closed, lights dimmed and chairs stacked. But she saw him, Tyler, inside, wiping down the counter like he always did during his night shift. She didn't knock. She just walked in. "We're closed," he called without looking up. Then he saw her. You should lock your doors, Wednesday replied, stepping further into the room. He blinked. I haven't seen you in days, he said, his voice softer now. Are you okay? Wednesday didn't answer. She simply walked to her usual booth and sat down, placing Faulkner's weathered journal on the table like a relic of war. Read it, she said. Tyler hesitated, frowning. But then he walked over and sat across from her. The journal was already open to a marked page, a black raven feather tucked between the lines like a dagger. He read aloud. The Hyde is artistic in nature, but equally vindictive and temperamental. Born of mutation. Dormant until awakened by trauma, hypnosis, or chemical inducement. The awakening forms a bond. An unshakable one. The creature imprints on whoever frees it, sees them as its master. Tyler gave a dry laugh. You think this means you control me? He scoffed, eyes narrowing. That I take orders from you? He closed the journal with a sharp snap. This is just your way of avoiding me. Again. You always need a puzzle to solve so you don't have to deal with feelings, right? Then his posture shifted. In a smooth motion, he slid out of his seat and moved beside her. The air seemed to tighten around them. There's no chance of you being my master, he said, his voice lower now, more intimate, more dangerous. Not as long as I can have my way with you. He leaned in and kissed her. Chapter 54. The smell hit him first. It was faint, sour, just beneath the sterile tang of disinfectant and dust. Sheriff Galpin paused at the door of Dr. Kinbott's office, brow furrowed. The hallway lights flickered once, then went still. She hadn't answered any calls in days. Missed appointments, no responses to emails. Not like her. She was a creature of precision, clocks and files and locked drawers. She didn't vanish. Except, now she had. He rattled the doorknob. Locked, of course. Dr. Kinbott, he called, voice echoing against the empty corridor. It's Sheriff Galpin. Silence. Then he pulled out his master key. The lock clicked, and the heavy door creaked open, a gust of stale air spilling out like a secret. Galpin stepped inside slowly, hand hovering near the grip of his holstered gun. The office was still, no sign of struggle. No overturned furniture. No broken glass. But it was too quiet. Too still. He saw her desk first neat, always neat. Calendar turned to last Thursday. A half-finished cup of tea, now cold. Files stacked in precise order. As if she had only stepped out for a moment. Then he smelled it again, stronger this time. Behind the divider curtain. He followed it. And there she was. Dr. Kinbott's body was slumped behind her chair, eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling. Her limbs were twisted unnaturally, spine arched as if she'd been yanked backward by something too fast, too strong. A dark smear of dried blood curved beneath her head like a halo gone wrong. Galpin froze. His throat tightened. Jesus. He moved slowly, squatting down beside her. Her fingers were curled like claws, nails broken, bruises along her neck. Her jaw was dislocated, snapped sideways, like someone had crushed it mid-scream. No signs of forced entry. No defensive wounds beyond the raw panic etched into her face. He stood up, ran a shaky hand over his mouth. Mayor's dead. Coroner's dead, he muttered under his breath. And now the damn therapist. The silence in the room pressed down heavier now, like the walls were listening. A chill swept through him, not from grief, but from the creeping certainty that whatever was killing his town wasn't done yet. He turned toward the filing cabinet, then paused. Dr. Kinbott's last patient record sat open on her desk. The top file was Tyler's, and it was missing. That morning, inside Principal Weem's office, Wednesday stood near the window while the news was delivered. Dr. Kinbott had been found dead in her office. Door locked from the inside. No witnesses. First the mayor, then the coroner. Now the therapist, she said without looking up. At this point, I wouldn't even bat an eye if Sheriff Galpin turned up dead. Just then, she caught movement in the hallway. Lucas was standing there with Bianca, holding a manila folder. "What are you doing here?" Wednesday asked, stepping out. "I came to give you a peace offering," Lucas said. "For what?" "For your missing journal," he said, lifting the folder. "My dad's been working day and night trying to avoid your family's lawsuit." He handed her the folder. "This is what I found in his desk. I don't know why, but he had your stolen journal pages mixed in with other files, mostly missing persons reports. And this." He pointed to a page inside the file. It was a report from the old Gates Mansion incident. Wednesday scanned the report. Her eyes froze on a name. Teresa L. Glau. "Mayor Walker was smarter than Sheriff Galpin," she said quietly. "The dead sister isn't so dead after all." She closed the file. Teresa L. Glau is an anagram. Lucas blinked. "Anagram for what?" "Laurel Gates," Wednesday answered, then turned and walked away. Behind her, Principal Weems stood watching with the others, Eden, Ajax, Yoko, Bianca, Xavier, all silent. "When are you planning to return my journal?" Wednesday said as soon as she saw Miss Thornhill standing in the corridor. "I don't have it, Wednesday," Thornhill replied quickly. "Cut the bull," Wednesday said, her tone razor-sharp. "I know your Laurel Gates. You think I conveniently forgot that you chased me down just to make sure I left that journal behind." "If I hadn't chased you down," Thornhill said tightly, "you would have left with it. Your family promised to lend it for the town exhibition." "How ironic that my journal was the only item stolen from that exhibit," Wednesday said coldly. Miss Thornhill froze for a second. "Sucks that I didn't hand it to you directly. I dropped it off to Mayor Walker at Pilgrim World. So you had no choice but to stick around, attend the exhibition, play nice," Wednesday added. "Wednesday, stop interrogating me," Miss Thornhill said, her voice tightening. "I have nothing to do with your missing journal. The sheriff didn't find anything, remember." "I'm not finished." Wednesday tilted her head, gaze sharp. "Want to know what happened immediately after that journal vanished?" "Bodies started turning up. Corpses. With missing parts. And they all led back to the Gates Mansion." "I don't know where you're getting at," Thornhill said, trying to maintain composure. "This is absurd." "Oh, I think you do." Wednesday stepped closer. "You know what tonight is, don't you?" Thornhill didn't answer. Wednesday narrowed her eyes. "The lunar eclipse." For a beat, the entire corridor held its breath. "You can search my room, but you won't find anything, Miss Addams," Thornhill said finally, trying to regain control of the moment. "I intend to," Wednesday said. "But it doesn't matter whether I find anything. I'm not stepping a foot onto Raven Island tonight." She paused. "Pray that it rains. At least then I won't be the only one who ruined your plan." Silence. Watching from the sidelines were Lucas, Bianca, Eden, Ajax, Xavier, Principal Weems, and the rest of the faculty, each one trying to piece together what exactly they'd just witnessed. Thornhill didn't say another word. She simply turned and walked away. But not before Wednesday caught the flicker of tension in her jaw. A tell, but Wednesday didn't smile. Xavier walked up beside Wednesday as the crowd slowly dispersed. His footsteps were deliberate, too calm for the way his jaw was clenched. "What do you want?" Wednesday asked without looking at him. "To make sure you don't get murdered before the eclipse ends," he said. "I'm your bodyguard now." She glanced at him, but didn't protest. "You were talking about the prophecy, weren't you?" Xavier continued. "The one Rowan mentioned. You think it's going down tonight?" Wednesday didn't answer, which was an answer in itself. They didn't need to say anything more. Within the hour, the nightshades convened in the hidden library beneath Nevermore. The air was damp, cold, heavy with old parchment and anticipation. Ajax, Yoko, Bianca, and Kent stood gathered around a weathered drawing laid out on the table, its edges yellowed, the ink faded but unmistakable. It showed Wednesday, unmistakably her, dueling Joseph Crackstone beneath a blood-red moon. The artist's signature in the corner read, "Delia Loslow, Rowan's mother." Dated exactly 30 years ago. So this is happening tonight. Kent looked up. But didn't Thornhill say they searched her room? They found nothing. Still, we need to watch over Wednesday until the eclipse ends, Bianca said. Tyler, or rather the hide just beneath the surface, narrowed his eyes the moment he saw Xavier walking beside Wednesday toward the weather vane. His grip on the coffee pot tightened just slightly, but he forced himself to breathe and move. Within minutes, he brought over 2 cups of coffee and placed one in front of Wednesday, who had already settled into her usual booth. Xavier stood near the edge of the table, arms crossed, clearly watching Tyler. He knows something's going to happen tonight, Wednesday said without emotion, looking at Tyler. Because of the eclipse. He just wants to make sure I don't end up in the middle of it. Tyler didn't look at her when he responded. His voice dropped, cool and edged. Thanks for bringing her here, Xavier. But I'll take it from here. It wasn't a request. Xavier didn't move right away, but Wednesday turned to him, her tone final. I'll be at Tyler's house tonight. It's far from Nevermore. Away from Raven Island. I'll be safer there. After a moment of tense silence, Xavier nodded and walked out. Later that evening, after Tyler's shift ended, the two lingered in the weather vane. The streets outside were empty. The sky above was starting to dim unnaturally. The eclipse was creeping in. Eventually, they slipped into the back and drove to Tyler's house. It was quiet. Too quiet. Then, Tyler's phone buzzed. FaceTime. He answered and immediately froze. Miss Thornhill's face filled the screen, composed but venomous. The camera panned. Eugene sat tied to a chair in what looked like a dark stone room, a red flare of panic in his eyes. A gun pressed to the side of his head. If you want him to live, come to Raven Island. Alone, Thornhill said. You have until the moon is up. The call ended. Tyler turned to Wednesday. His jaw was tight, his hands shaking. Call your dad, she said calmly. Tell him what's happening. Tyler fumbled for his phone, dialing fast. Dad, it's Thornhill. She's got Eugene. She's on Raven Island. Sheriff Galpin's voice on the other end sounded both alert and strained. All our vehicles are down. Someone slashed the tires. Every single one. Wednesday didn't wait. She bolted for the door. Get the nightshades, she called behind her. Get Weems. They didn't hesitate for only a second before running for Nevermore. They separated at the gates. Tyler didn't waste a second. He cut across the field, slipping past the west fence line and sprinting toward the beekeeping shed. The moonlight caught the side of the greenhouse, just enough to see someone already standing there. It was Eden. I thought you and Wednesday were supposed to be at your house, she said, surprised. Tyler didn't slow down. Change of plans. Eugene's been kidnapped. Miss Thornhill has him. She's on Raven Island. I need to get to the nightshades. We need backup. He pried up the floorboards of the shed without hesitation, revealing the old cellar doors underneath. Eden blinked, startled. I didn't know this was here. Neither did they, he said as he climbed down. Come on. She followed. Together, they moved fast through the tunnel, footsteps echoing softly through stone. They reached the hidden entrance that fed directly into the Nightshade Library, one the others didn't even know existed. Inside, the Nightshades were already mid-discussion. Bianca stood at the head of the table, with Xavier beside her. Ajax, Yoko, Kent, and the others surrounded them. Everyone turned as the second entrance creaked open. Tyler and Eden stepped into view. What the hell? Xavier began, eyes wide. Where did you come from? We don't have time, Tyler said quickly. Miss Thornhill kidnapped Eugene. She's using him to lure Wednesday to Raven Island. Before anyone could respond, a sharp tapping filled the room. Thing, perched near the far bookshelf, pounded his fingers against the wood. Frantic. Urgent. He began signing furiously. Ajax squinted, interpreting. He says. Miss Thornhill killed Weems. The air in the library dropped. Bianca stepped forward, eyes narrowing. What? Things signed faster, more erratic now. She pretended to be Wednesday, Ajax translated. She drugged her. Then she killed Principal Weems. Everyone went quiet. Then Bianca turned to the rest of the group. We need to evacuate Nevermore. Now. No one argued. Meanwhile, deep below Raven Island, in the crypt hidden beneath layers of time and rot, Miss Thornhill stood clapping slowly, the sound echoing off the stone. Well played, Wednesday, she said, stepping forward. I was so desperate to keep you away, I actually fell for Principal Weems' little trick. Didn't know she was a shapeshifter. Impressive. Too bad it cost her her life. Wednesday was suspended by thick iron shackles, her arms stretched out, her boots barely scraping the floor. Her black uniform was torn and covered in dirt. She kept her gaze fixed on Eugene, who sat slumped across the crypt, chained to the ground, but still breathing. We had a deal, she said coldly. Let him go. Not until I finish what I started, Thornhill replied, walking in circles like a sermonizing fanatic. Joseph Crackstone will rise tonight. I get that he wanted my family dead and everything, Wednesday said, voice dry, but why worship him like some holy relic? You do know he lost, right? Thornhill smirked. Joseph Crackstone was my ancestor. Wednesday raised an eyebrow. Ancestral worship. That explains a lot. What no other family members worthy of remembering. Crackstone was a visionary. He nearly succeeded in purging this land of the outcasts until your precious Goody Addams ruined everything. She sneered, eyes glowing with fanatic conviction. The outcasts stole his land. They built a school over his tomb. Now, I'm going to return this land to who it really belongs to. Yeah, Eugene muttered through his split lip, the land belonged to the outcasts first. Crackstone stole it the moment the pilgrims got here. Thornhill's eyes flicked to him, irritated. You weren't supposed to be here, bug boy. Wednesday's voice cut through the tension. How did you find the seal under the crypt? Oh, we've known about Crackstone's resting place for generations. We just didn't know how to access it. After his defeat, the normies in the area went into hiding. That stone monument in town, nothing but shame. She sniffed. We've tried destroying it over the years. They say bad things happen to anyone who tries. And they're right. If your goal was to destroy outcasts, why target normies too? Wednesday asked. Thornhill hesitated, then sighed. Things didn't go as planned. I wanted to enslave Tyler. Let him loose. Let the hide tear through Nevermore, frame the whole thing on the school. I moved into town the minute I got hired. I was this close to having full control of him. Her gaze narrowed. Then you showed up with your cynical stare and your damn black umbrella. Always prying. You stole the journal from Pilgrim World. Do you have any idea how long I've been looking for that? Ever since the park opened, I knew it had clues. But you had it all along. Of course you did. She held up Goody's journal, flipping it shut with a snap. Then she grabbed Wednesday's chains, dragging her toward the sarcophagus at the center of the room. Eugene twisted, yelling hoarsely, Wednesday. What are you doing? She's not doing anything, Thornhill answered. But her blood is. She yanked Wednesday's arm down and pressed her palm against the cold, engraved stone. Goody sealed Crackstone with a blood lock, one that can only be undone with the blood of her direct descendant. A deep rumble echoed through the crypt. The circle of runes around the sarcophagus lit up. Electricity sparked from the glyphs. Thick, black smoke began to pour from the cracks in the stone. The air grew cold, unnaturally cold, as the temperature dropped. Suddenly, the sarcophagus split open, and Joseph Crackstone rose. In his resurrected form, Crackstone looked like a withered corpse reassembled by dark sorcery. His pilgrim robes were tattered, but glowing with power, stitched together with sinew and shadow. His eyes were milky white, with veins of black magic spidering outward into his pale, undead skin. The flesh on his hands had regrown in jagged patches, still seared from centuries of rot, his long fingernails curled like claws. An old blade rested at his side, humming with the same sickly green energy now floating around him. He stepped forward slowly, silent, regal, terrifying. Wednesday stared him down from her chains. "You look worse than your portrait." Crackstone did not speak, but his eyes landed on her with one purpose: murder. Eden, running on all fours in her full wolf form, bounded ahead through the twisted brush of Raven Island, things scrambling over rocks and roots, pointing with frantic gestures. Tyler, already ahead, skidded to a halt in the clearing just outside the crypt. And there, standing in the center of the smoldering field, was Joseph Crackstone, his undead form shrouded in smoke and hatred. Beside him stood Miss Thornhill, no longer pretending Laura Gates, grinning with bloodlust. The moment Tyler locked eyes with Crackstone, something inside him snapped. If he was here, then something had happened to Wednesday. "No," Tyler growled, and the hide burst forth. His limbs cracked and elongated, claws ripping through his sleeves. With a guttural scream, the hide lunged straight at Crackstone. But the air shimmered around the pilgrim's staff, a magnetic force field blasted out, sending the hide hurtling backward through the air. He crashed into a tree with a bone-shaking thud. Eden didn't hesitate. With a snarl, she leapt onto Crackstone, her claws slashing at his undead flesh, but Crackstone grabbed her by the throat midair. She howled in pain before being slammed into the dirt. Laura Gates stood in awe. "Do you see now? Do you see what kind of power you tried to stop? You were never going to win." They left Eden and the hide in the dust as they turned toward Nevermore. Wednesday broke into a sprint the second she saw them leave. "Eugene," she shouted, still bruised and bloodied, but moving like fury itself. "Help them. Get them to safety." Eugene nodded and stumbled toward Tyler and Eden. "Come on, guys, hang in there." Thing gestured wildly, his fingers desperate. "They're headed to Nevermore," Wednesday muttered grimly, already running full speed. When she got there, the school was ablaze, crackling flames rising toward the blood-red eclipse above. Screams echoed in the air. Ash fell like snow. Crackstone stood at the steps of Nevermore, staff glowing, setting fire with each sweep. Wednesday didn't hesitate. She grabbed a fallen rapier from the school's fencing rack, charged toward Crackstone, and threw the sword straight at his chest. But he caught it midair with telekinetic force and blasted her backward with his staff. She slammed into the wall with a grunt. Xavier loosed an arrow, but Crackstone swatted it away with his palm. Bianca then darted behind him, plunging a knife into his back. Crackstone staggered for a moment, finally vulnerable. That was all the time Wednesday needed. She grabbed the shattered shard of the rapier, rolled forward, and drove it straight through his heart. There was no scream, just a sound like a dying flame. Crackstone began to disintegrate into glowing embers, his body unraveling into dust. And then silence. Just the crackling of fire. Bianca, breathing hard, turned. "Is it over?" "I doubt it," Wednesday said, catching her breath. A click echoed behind them. They turned slowly. Miss Thornhill stood there, arm extended, gun aimed right at them. "Well, I'll give it to you, Wednesday. You're annoyingly smart. But you forgot one thing," she said coldly. "You brought a sword to a gunfight." Wednesday slowly raised her hands. "Fair point." "So did I," Bianca said, sighing as she raised hers. Miss Thornhill smirked. "You're all a pain in the ass." But then the wind changed. She turned and froze. From every angle, shadows began to move. The Nightshade Society had surrounded her. Sirens were humming low and deep, their voices reverberating in the air. Thornhill's eyes widened as her body started to twitch. "You can't be serious." Ajax stepped forward. His beanie was off. His eyes glowed pale. "No hard feelings," he said. "Actually, never mind. Stone cold's what you deserve." And Miss Thornhill turned to stone, mid-scream. The moment cracked with the sound of sirens. USPPO vehicles roared onto the grounds. United States Secret Program for Protecting Outcasts. The words were printed on every truck and helicopter. Agents jumped out, flooding the field, tending to students, helping the wounded. They rushed toward the fallen. Wednesday sprinted toward the incoming ambulances. She froze when she saw them placing Tyler and Eden on stretchers. Both were bloodied, bruised, but breathing. "Eden," she whispered. Tyler turned his head weakly, his voice hoarse. "Did we get him?" "We did," she said. And for the first time in a long time, Wednesday Addams smiled. "Just a little, but enough.